So, Andre, we're here to talk about the Knick.
Awesome.
Tell us a bit about the show, and in terms of the involvement of Steven Soderbergh as well, because I believe he produces it.
He actually he produces it, he directs it, he lights it, he edits it. He does a number of things. So the show is set at the Knickerbocker Hospital in New York at the turn of the century. So 1900 is the year that we use, and it's about this surgeon played by Clive Owen, who's sort of on the cutting edge of medicine, but also has drug addiction. I play a character, Algernon Edwards, who is a young black surgeon who was raised in New York but trained in London and has been living in Paris, working also on the cutting edge of medicine, who comes back to the Knickerbocker to work alongside Clive Owen's character, but is quickly turned away because of the fact that he's black. And so he ends up starting a shadow infirmary in the basement where he treats minority patients after hours. And the show is very much about this sort of upstairs, downstairs relationship. And there's, a love story that I have with a young lady. Clive also has a love story. There's loads of other things that are happening, but the story is really sort of, the first season anyway, is really sort of centered on the relationship between these two characters.
You mentioned that Clive and indeed your character on the cutting edge of medicine,
Yeah.
but very different to what we'd consider cutting edge now.
Yeah.
What were the challenges of trying to bring that to the screen?
Well, I think, it was very, what we would sort of call primitive. I mean, there weren't, they hadn't yet discovered, well, there was some sort of version of anesthesia, but we weren't wearing gloves. Doctors weren't wearing gloves at that time, for example. And so, and suction was done by hand cranking. So it was a much messier world, much messier vocation. And so I think one of the challenges that we faced was how to really sort of illuminate just how gory and graphic it really would have been, while at the same time not making it a show about sort of, gore and like gross out. So and I think we did a good job with that. That again comes back to Steven and his mastery of all the elements of storytelling.
Were you prepared for the amount of gore and that side of things?
Yeah, the first day, we had a lot of blood. I mean, it was all over our shoes, all over the floor, and so it was a little bit daunting at first. But after a while, it just sort of became a part of a day's work, and so we got over it pretty quickly. Then the challenge became the fact that it got so sticky that we couldn't really hold onto the instruments, and it got a little bit messy, but the gore of it wasn't so bad. I did have an episode where I had to there's a cockroach that was crawling on the pillow next to me while I'm asleep, and so that one was a little bit challenging in terms of the gore, or in terms of the grossness of it, but.
You mentioned some of the challenges that a black surgeon would have faced at the time.
Yeah.
How did you go about researching that?
Well, I read a lot about black surgeons at that time. I didn't realize that there were as many as there were, so I was surprised to find that out. And then I also read a lot of W.B. Du Bois, who's one of my favorite writers, and spoke a lot about this idea of double consciousness, that black people sort of living in these two different worlds, not quite fitting in the black society, but also not quite fitting in the mainstream world. And that really spoke to me. I also read a book called Low Life, which was just about New York at the time. And then a lot of it was just in terms of the racial aspects of it. Me having grown up in the South, in Alabama, I think there's a certain amount of understanding that I just carry around in my own sort of DNA about that. So I used a lot of family memories and stories that I've heard, and then also my own personal experiences.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned growing up in the South. You also starred in Selma,
yeah.
And obviously this program as well. What were you surprised at the slow rate of change from 1900 to the time of Selma to even growing up in the South now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still have a very long way to go. There's an episode, in the first season called "Get the Rope." That's about a race riot that's happening, and there's a misunderstanding between a black citizen and a police officer. Which then led to a number of black people being hunted in the streets. And, when you turn on the news now in America, so much of what's being reported is about this sort of police brutality and still, people trying to negotiate what those boundaries are. And so it was surprising to me that in 1900, the same things were being dealt with. And it's a little upsetting and disappointing that we haven't found a way yet to move beyond it. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think that shows like these, like the Knick, do have something to say about it and can sort of help move the ball down the field in some way. So I'm very proud to be a part of it.
I mean, I think one of the things you mentioned that you weren't aware of black surgeons at the time. I certainly wasn't either.
Right.
Why do you think we don't hear about important black people from that time?
It's a good question. I think part of it is that there aren't, we need more people telling those stories. More filmmakers, more writers, more actors, more, just more people who are just interested in investigating those stories and telling them more and more. Even with, with a movie like Selma, Martin Luther King who's a figure who we all, have some relationship to. I think even in my life, having grown up in the South, I've read his speeches and learned a lot about him. But to me, he's always sort of been, and for a lot of people, I think, sort of a speech and a statue and a street name and like this figure. We don't really know much about the man himself, and so I think that's one of the things that Selma and Ava DuVernay really did, is really sort of illuminated who he was as a person. And so more of that, I think, is how we get more of those stories out there.
Sure. And concentrating on you for a moment, you've done a lot of television work before and film as well. What was it like doing a big Netflix project like this?
HBO project.
Oh, HBO.
HBO Cinemax project. Yeah, it was really exciting, man. We did 10 episodes. Steven directed all of them, and so it felt like doing a 10-hour movie. It didn't feel like doing everything I'd done before in television was very episodic, and so in this case we got all 10 scripts ahead of time, and so it really felt like doing a movie and building a character, over 10 episodes, now 20 episodes. So it was a pretty incredible experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell us a bit about season 2. What can we expect to see in that?
I think we'll see a lot more of what's going on in New York and not just what's happening inside of the hospital. We'll learn a lot more about the characters who we've already met. You learn more about Algernon, more about Nurse Elkins and Cleary and all the characters. It goes much deeper, emotionally deeper, and it gets quite a bit darker, which I think is hard to believe, but it actually does. But again, it's all fueled by that quest for new knowledge, and so it's a pretty exciting season of television, I think.
Mm-hmm. One of the other aspects of the show is Clive Owen is a high-functioning drug user.
Yeah.
Again, something that we don't hear much about from the time, but how commonplace was it?
From what I understand, it was quite commonplace. There's a book that we read that we were given called Genius on the Edge about this Dr. Halstead, and I think that it was quite common that people, doctors especially, would use that, self-medicate in that way. Hopefully it's less common now.
Hopefully, yes. Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the location as well, because it looks incredibly authentic. Is it filmed on an actual set or a former hospital at all?
The set, most of the interiors are done on a soundstage that was built in Brooklyn, which is incredible. You walk on there and every detail of it is like spot on. The exteriors were done in a neighborhood called Bedford-Stuyvesant, which basically they put some dirt on the street, changed a few signs and some windows, and it was 1900. I mean, the neighborhood is almost untouched. And having spent 15 years in New York, it's not something I ever really took notice of. But yeah, it really feels like that neighborhood in particular really feels like a sort of living museum. So,
does it feel like you're stepping back in time when you?
Absolutely. You walk on set and it's like, oh, here we are, 1900. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're going to have a chance to have a look at something from that era ourselves here. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully we'll see you there as well.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Excellent, man.
Thank you very much, brother.
Thank you very much.
Man.
Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey